Hi everyone, today we are going to be looking at the sun's solo from shadows. Our learning objectives for today's lesson are to gain knowledge of the choreographic content and the production features of the sun's solo. Your extra challenge is to begin to link the choreographic intention, the choreographic approach, and the stimulus to the sun's solo, and your literacy focus is to use dance-specific terminology throughout the lesson when discussing the choreographic content and production features. For our starter task, you now need to watch the sun's solo. Whilst watching the clip of the section, I want you to note down what you see. This could be, for example, how the sun is using the props in the space within the solo. Note down as many points as you can, as this will help you throughout the lesson. The sun's solo starts at 6 minutes 23 seconds and ends at 7 minutes 29 seconds. As we have now watched the clip of the section, I want you to get out or download the sun's solo booklet. It should have 5 pages which consist of the aural setting, the lighting, the staging and props, the choreographic content and the costume, which we will be looking at today. Using the notes that you wrote down in your starter task, I want you to spend 3 minutes putting them on the correct pages of the booklet. We are going to start by looking at the staging and props of the sun's solo. Using the images, I want you to label and describe the set and props. Remember to think about the type, the location, the colours, the shape, the backdrop, the objects, the style, and the materials of the props. You have 3 minutes. The sun's solo is performed in a simple black box setting with black walls, wings, backdrop and flooring, and on an end stage. The sun performs on a diagonal pathway from upstage left to downstage right, and horizontally from stage left to stage right. He picks up his stool and the daughter's stool and places them downstage right. He then picks up the table and places that downstage right too. In the middle of the solo, he picks up the 2 stools, swings them above his head and slams them down to the ground at downstage centre. Whilst the son performs his solo, the mother, father and daughter all sit on one bench upstage left. At the bottom of the page, there should be a box which asks you to highlight if the staging and props suggest a certain aspect. I want you to go through and highlight any of the phrases that you think the staging and props suggest about the piece. For example, you could highlight the phrase "set incorporated with the action" as the sun lies down on and hides behind the table at points during the solo. You have 2 minutes. We should now have lots of different ideas for staging and props of the sun's solo. Make sure you have written down and highlighted each of the aspects that I have discussed, as well as your own ideas. We are now going to move on and look at the lighting of the sun's solo. Using the images, label and describe the lighting. Remember to think about the colours, the direction, the shape, the effect, the intensity, and any shadows that the lighting creates. You have 2 minutes. In the sun's solo, there is a white shaft of light that shines from downstage right to upstage left, which creates a corridor effect, or as if a door has just been opened. This section also uses white side lighting that are of low intensity, and the mother, father and daughter are visible but dimly lit upstage left, sitting on the bench. Why do you think that the lighting has been significantly changed in this section? What could the shafts of light suggest? Now, go through and highlight if the lighting suggests a certain aspect about the piece. For example, you could highlight the phrase "highlights key areas of the performing space" as the beam of light creates a pathway for the sun to dance along. You could also highlight the phrase "mood, atmosphere" as the higher intensity beam of light sets an intense, angry mood to match the anxious music. You have 2 minutes. Next, we are going to look at the aural setting and the sun's solo. I want you to create a mind map to describe the aural setting and the accompaniment. Your extension task is to analyse how the aural setting is used effectively. Remember to think about the instruments, the time signature, the style, the volume, the speed, the music-dance relationships, any silence, and if you can hear any of the dancer's movements. The Sun solo starts at 6 minutes 23 seconds and ends at 7 minutes 29 seconds. The aural setting in the Sun solo provides a climax within the musical score, which is also reflected through the movement. The music changes to chord-like sounds, a violin playing rapidly and agitated shrieking notes. At the end of the solo, there are high-pitched chords and a deep, low piano note, which is a clear indication that this section has ended and a new section is starting. Now, go through and highlight if the aural setting and accompaniment suggest a certain aspect about the piece. Think about how this section links the choreographic intention and stimulus. You also need to look at the music-dance relationships of the section and highlight the correct term. Are the music and dance in direct correlation, or do they mutually exist or disassociate with one another? You have 2 minutes. We are going to look at the choreographic content of the Sun solo. First, I want you to describe key motifs from this section referring to the action, space, dynamics and relationships. Secondly, I want you to move on to naming any structuring devices and form within this section. Thirdly, I want you to move on to the choreographic devices box, naming any of the devices and where they are visible within the solo. There is lots to analyse in terms of the choreographic content, so make sure these boxes are full of your ideas and examples. An example of a motif for the movement content is when the sun suddenly stands up sharply from his seat at the table. He picks up his stool and runs with it in his right hand on a diagonal pathway from upstage left to downstage right. When he reaches downstage right, he holds the stool with both hands, suddenly swings the stool above his head before crouching down and slamming it to the ground. For structuring devices and form, an example is narrative, as the son is clearly distressed and is barricading the door in anger, trying to protect his family from the outside force. For choreographic devices, this section uses climax. Prior to this section, the mother has just completed her solo and kneels down softly on the floor with the father. A low-pitched chord is played softly and quietly on the piano. Suddenly, the son stands up sharply from his seat at the table before picking up his stool and running with it down the corridor of light. He takes the stool above his head and slams it to the ground. Following this, he does the same with the table, putting it on his side as though he is creating a barricade to the danger outside. At the same time, the aural setting plays loud, higher-pitched chords on the piano and violin. The dynamic range in both the son's movement and aural setting is faster and louder and maintained throughout the solo. This is in contrast to the previous, quieter tone of the piece. Your next task is to highlight if the choreographic content suggests a certain aspect about the piece. You have 2 minutes. Finally, we are going to move on and look at the costume of the sun. Using the image, label and describe the costume. Remember to think about the colour, the shape, the texture, the style, the size, and the material. Your extension task is to describe the dancer's physique as well as the costume. You have 3 minutes. The sun wears a collarless white shirt that is untucked. The top few buttons on his shirt are undone and his sleeves are rolled up to his elbows. He wears grey trousers and has bare feet. Why do you think the colours of his costume are so dull? What do you think that the costume suggests about the time period? Now, go through and highlight if the costume suggests a certain aspect about the piece. For example, you could highlight the phrase choreographic intention as the muted, faded colours suggest that the clothing is old and tired, the cotton fabric suggests low status, and the rolled up sleeves suggest manual labour. This all suggests that the family is living in poverty. You have 2 minutes. Well done for today's work. We have looked at the aural setting, the lighting, the staging and props, the choreographic content, and the costume of the sun's solo from Shadows. For your homework, you now need to download and complete the homework table. This homework table asks you to write down how the choreographic content, for example, supports the contributions of the piece. The contributions could refer to the choreographic intention, the stimulus, or the choreographic approach. You are then required to give your personal interpretation of the choreographic content and then how the choreographic content has an effect on the audience.